All right, good evening. Can someone out there in the chat let me know whether I'm coming through clear? Can you hear me? The volume's good. What's going on? So I see that Al from Russia, DJ Donnelly, Kenneth Edward Tar, which I believe is a futar, actually. I don't think it's the real deal, and I think we're all thankful for that, are out there. Looks like Mike Hughes stopped in earlier and said, unfortunately, he'll be asleep when this starts, so someone needs to go wake him up. Hey, Andrew, how are you? You just joined in. Could someone just in the chat just let me know that my volume's okay, that you can actually hear me? And DJ Johnny said that he stopped playing the game because they stopped giving us content. I don't play video games. This was the only game that I ever even tempted me to kind of get involved in the gaming. And then I just heard horror stories about problems with it, and I just quickly gave up on it. Thank you, Al, for letting me know it's loud and clear. So this is the first time I've gone live. There's going to be some hiccups because I'm not used to it. I edit the hell out of my videos, and so I apologize for anything of that sort. So DJ Donnelly is saying that my mic is crackling a bit. Is anyone else getting that problem? But at any rate, I wanted to take today as the first time I've gone live to talk about the Friday 13th lawsuit. If there's one thing that I'm consistently asked about, it is the lawsuit. And let me just give you a little bit of background for those who don't know. I did write for the Friday 13th, the franchise website, for a while. I added content alongside Jason Parker, and I'm proud of that content. Some of it now exists as the first layer of autopsy videos I created for the Friday 13th series. But there is other articles that are going to remain there and be exclusive there. It all really depended on why I wrote the articles and the agreement between me and Jason Parker. I have nothing but respect for Mr. Parker. He's awesome. He's the reason I found the Sausage Factory when he guested on the Sausage Factory. So I owe a lot to him, and hopefully I gave him some content that was useful to him. Hey, Jeff, how are you? So I've been circling the Friday 13th community for quite a long time. My own personal experience with the Friday 13th franchise goes back to when I was a kid. I've explained before that there was 2 televisions in the house, a black and white television upstairs, which was a small set, and a big color set downstairs. And I didn't have control of the big set, so I was pretty much just relegated to the small black and white set. And that's where I saw a ton of the monster movies that formed my DNA as a horror fan. Now, because it was a black and white screen, I didn't have any real trepidation about older films because they were all black and white to me. Can you understand what I'm saying, though, or is the crackling too bad? Or is it just my awful voice? All these things could be true. So in the late 70s, ABC TV started premiering a lot of horror films because they were producing horror films. And I think it was a method of creating a consistency on their channel so that when their productions came out, they had the same weight as the theatricals that they were licensing. So you'd be watching Dark Night of the Scarecrow and the broadcast premiere of Halloween. So I discovered modern horror the same way I discovered all those classic monster movies that I'd grown up on. And Friday 13th premiered on ABC, and I was there. And as a young child, it was mind-blowing. It's hard to describe just how much impact it had because you're going to have a different experience than I did. They'd shown The Exorcist, they'd shown Halloween, they'd shown Prom Night. These are films that had a deep impact on me, but Friday was different. It connected with me in a way that they couldn't. And the way it hit me was that it felt authentic. Now, I understand now why. I mean, it was filmed less than a half hour from my house. So the iconography, the landscape, the foliage, the accents of the characters, it all made sense to me on a level that Halloween didn't exactly. Halloween seemed a little more stagey. Now, Halloween was scarier, but it didn't seem as real. And that's a weird thing because you expect that the more real something is, the scarier it is. And that wasn't true for me. There was something about Friday. There was something about the sounds in the woods that they recorded and the look of the lake and even the skyline, the mountain ranges that just looked really authentic to me. And it was because it was my surroundings. So I fell in love with Friday. And keep in mind, this was the television print. So there was no gore. The murder scenes were all abbreviated. And there was no sexuality really on screen. It was all kind of very dark and you couldn't see anything. That television print was splicy and it was overly dark. During the chase scene, you couldn't really make out what was happening. But I fell in love with the film. It connected with me in a deep way. So I became a Friday fan at a very young age. The second film I also saw on TV, I believe ABC as well. The third film I actually didn't see for a couple of years. But I remember the newspaper advertisement for it, and I was bothering my parents to take me to go see this movie. It was in 3D. It was a Friday the 13th. It seemed like perfect mesh, and they refused. A year later, final chapter comes out, newspaper clipping. Absolutely, I wanted to go. I was bothering them. But this time, my grandmother said, I'll take him and his sister. And she took us to go see Friday the 13th, the final chapter, in theaters. I was a 10-year-old who had my mind simply exploded at that point. I'd seen a couple horror films in theaters. I'd seen Psycho 2 and I'd seen One Dark Night. But this was different. This felt really unsafe and really affected me. What I wanted from the rest of my life was pretty clear in that theater that night. I wanted to be part of the world that could create something like Friday the 13th. I think that was the night I became a writer. It'd be many, many years before the skills would catch up to my ambition, and maybe they still haven't. I don't know. You be the judge of that. That's my plug for you to buy something of mine. But I wanted, because of that night in that theater, to be part of that, to create something like Friday the 13th, the final chapter, or the original film. So Friday has been in my DNA for a long time, and that's why when I speak about this issue, understand it carries a lot of weight with me. I'm not speaking of it as from a distance. I'm speaking of it as someone who really believes that the Friday series is close to my heart. I have said that I don't actually want another Friday the 13th made, and that's because I just don't trust Hollywood anymore. If they could make films as consistently good as those first four were, we could talk. But I think that if we're all being honest, Friday is a series that I don't want to be filled with any more guilty pleasures than it already is. I want legitimately great films that make me feel like I did in those early teen years when I discovered the franchise. And it's been a long time since a new film has really made me feel that way. I'm a big Jason X fan, but that's a different animal. That's not as much a guilty pleasure as it's just a lot of great, dumb fun that knows what it is. But I don't want to get in that debate tonight. What I'd rather do is talk about the lawsuit. So I have investigated the lawsuit. I've followed it very closely, probably closer than most. And the ups and downs over the last several years have been not dramatic, but they've been fascinating to me to watch this court case that's going to affect the entire entertainment landscape unfold in what I consider my backyard, the Friday the 13th franchise. This decision, when it is finally settled, will change Hollywood, period, full stop. Because you can't continue to do business as you used to do if there's a limitation on your rights. So let's go back and do something different for a while, and it'll head back to Friday the 13th, I promise you. What is copyright? As a writer, I had to become very familiar with what copyright is because it's not quite what most people think it is. Copyright was invented as a way to protect the labor of an artist. And that's not normally how we think about it. We think about it as protecting the work, and it doesn't protect the work, it protects the creator. If you go and build houses for a living, you have to figure out how much your materials are going to cost, how much the labor you're going to hire is going to cost, and how much your time is worth, and what the market will bear, and you come up with a price to build a house or a cabinet or a car. Service industry works the same way. What does it cost to fix something? There's a matter of putting the cost ahead and finding out where you can make a profit that makes it sustainable. But when you create art, especially commercial art, it's a lot different. You are essentially creating something that's only value is what people will pay for it based on their enjoyment of it. And that creates a problem, because if I'm a painter and I paint a great painting, I can sell that painting as many times as I need to, the original painting and then the reproductions, right? But we live in a world where anyone can take a photo of that painting and pass it around as a printout for free. So the value of buying that from me is lessened. So copyright was invented as a way to protect the artist who creates art. The copyright at its core is the idea that my work should be protected from abuse from people who did not create. So when the termination clause, when it was added to the law, was created to protect artists who work in a field where there's only so many ways to get your product to market. So I can't distribute a film, for instance, myself, even if I made a film. If I created something brilliant with my home video camera, it's absolutely brilliant, competed with the world, I still wouldn't have a mechanism to get it into theaters. So I would have to make certain deals to have that film reach market. And the termination allowed for me to, after that period, get my work back and not have lost the work permanently to an arrangement that, as a no one, I would have to sign whatever was offered to me. But it really wasn't intended for film. If you think about it, about music or books, it makes a lot of sense. An artist who is just getting started is going to sign with whatever record label offers them whatever deal, right? But in reality, eventually that work may be more valuable than it was sold for. Same thing with fiction. But there is one distinct difference in that with film, and that's that film doesn't have quite the limitations as a catalog. So music sells forever, but when it's popular and being played on the radio at first is when it's going to sell most of its copies, with some exceptions like the Metallica Black Album or AC/DC Back in Black or the Beatles catalog. But those are few and far between. The net effect is that the company that puts forward the money to release a product is going to make the most, but then the artist eventually will get their rights back and they can make the remaining profit from there on out. The way the copyright termination clause reads is that it must be applied for no less than 25 years after the piece of art has been entered into contract, but that it won't take effect until 35 years after the product has been released. So that gives a 10-year window for any artist to decide to try and take back their work's rights. And then there's a transition period. So it's any remaining stock or any additional rights or licenses. So in other words, if you had 6 concurrent licenses for products being made off a piece of art, you'd have the warning to when you'd need to stop them if the rights were reverting to the original creator. This is not bad law. It just is too wide of law. Have the right. And it all stems from whether he was working for hire. So if a company